When I rolled into that courtroom in my wheelchair, my daughter Jessica's lips curved into a satisfied smirk as she leaned toward her attorney. The morning light caught the diamond bracelet on her wrist, the one I'd given her for her 40th birthday. My son-in-law Brad sat beside her, his personal injury lawyer persona perfectly composed, confident. They thought they'd already won. Then Judge Maria Santos looked up from the case file on her bench. Her eyes widened, and the gavel slipped from her fingers, clattering against the wood with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, but in that stillness, everyone heard it. "Patricia Reynolds? Agent Confessor? The one from Belgrade?" The entire room froze. My daughter's smirk vanished. Brad's face went white. Their attorney, a young man who'd clearly prepared for an easy conservatorship case, looked confused, his pen hovering uselessly over his notepad. I let the moment stretch, just like I used to during interrogations. Then I stood up from the wheelchair, my legs steady despite what 18 months of doctor's reports claimed, and smiled at the judge. "Hello, Your Honor. It's been a long time. Let me tell you how I got here. Sitting in a courtroom where my own daughter was trying to declare me mentally incompetent. It's not a story I ever thought I'd have to tell, but then again, I never thought my daughter would steal nearly $1 million from me either. 18 months earlier, I was living in my 3-bedroom house in Pleasant Valley, California, the home I'd bought after retiring from the CIA. 32 years I'd given them, most of it in psychological operations. I was good at my job, too good according to some. They called me the confessor because subjects would tell me things they'd never admit to anyone else. I understood people, understood what motivated them, what scared them, what they wanted. I could read micro-expressions the way other people read street signs. When I retired at 66, I thought I'd finally have time to build the relationships I'd sacrificed during my career, especially with Jessica. My daughter and I had always had a complicated relationship. I'd missed her school plays, her debate tournaments, her college graduation, all for classified operations I couldn't explain. She'd grown up resenting my absence, and I couldn't blame her for that. I really couldn't. So when she started visiting more frequently after my retirement, I was happy, hopeful, even. Maybe we could finally heal the wounds my career had left. "Mom, I'm worried about you," she said one Saturday afternoon, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee I'd made. "You forgot my birthday last week." I hadn't forgotten her birthday. I'd sent her a card 2 weeks early because I was going on a cruise, but I said nothing, just watched her face, the slight tension around her eyes, the way she glanced toward the living room where my mail sat on the side table. "Did I? I'm so sorry, sweetheart." "It's okay, Mom. It happens. But it's not the first time lately. Remember when you called me at 3 in the morning last month? I'd never called her at 3 in the morning. I'm a light sleeper, have been since my training days, and I never even wake up at that hour unless something's wrong. But again, I watched. Her tells were subtle, practiced, but they were there. The slight elevation in pitch at the end of her sentence, the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "I'm sorry about that too," I said softly. Over the next few months, the visits increased. Jessica came with her husband Brad, and they'd ask careful questions. How was I sleeping? Was I remembering to take my vitamins? Did I need help managing my finances? That last one came up more and more frequently. "Mom, you know Brad handles complex legal documents all day. He could help you organize your accounts, make sure everything's in order." I'd spent 3 decades in intelligence. I knew when someone was running a long con, but I needed to understand the full scope before I acted. In the CIA, we called it letting the target expose the network. Don't grab the first person you identify. Wait, watch, and they'll lead you to everyone else involved. So I let them keep talking. I even acted slightly confused sometimes, just to see how they'd react. And Jessica, my own daughter, she'd get this flash of satisfaction in her eyes before covering it with concern. The turning point came 4 months after those initial visits. Jessica and Brad showed up with paperwork. "Mom, we've been talking with a wonderful assisted living facility, Sunnyvale Gardens. They have beautiful grounds, activities, a nurse on staff 24 hours. You'd love it there." "I'm happy here," I said. "We know, but we're worried. Living alone at your age, what if you fall? What if you forget to turn off the stove?" Brad's voice was smooth, practiced. He used the same tone I'd heard him use in court videos online, the sympathetic advocate who's really twisting the knife. "What if you just visit the place?" "Just look at it," Jessica pressed. I visited. It was nice enough. Sunnyvale Gardens Assisted Living sat on 5 acres in the valley, with walking paths and a garden and rooms that looked more like apartments than hospital rooms. The staff seemed kind. It could have been worse. But I noticed something during the tour. Jessica filled out forms I never saw. She spoke to the director privately while I looked at the library, and when we left, she had a folder under her arm. 2 weeks later, they came back with more papers. "Power of attorney documents. Just in case something happens, Mom, so we can help you." I signed them. Not because I trusted them anymore. I'd stopped trusting them months ago, but because I needed to see how far they'd go. I needed evidence. And you don't get evidence by shutting down the operation too early. I also quietly visited my own attorney, Eleanor Chen, a sharp woman I'd helped during a case years ago when she needed witness protection for a client. I gave her copies of everything I signed and told her to watch my accounts. "Patricia, if you think they're going to exploit you, why give them power of attorney?" she asked. "Because I need to document everything. If I refuse now, they'll claim I'm paranoid, suspicious, showing signs of dementia. But if I cooperate and they abuse the power, that's a clear crime. I'm building a case, Eleanor. I need it to be ironclad." 3 weeks after I signed those papers, Jessica and Brad moved me to Sunnyvale Gardens. They told the staff I was showing signs of confusion and needed structured care. They took my phone, saying I kept calling people at odd hours. They restricted my visitors, saying too much stimulation made me agitated. I let them. Because the CIA taught me something valuable. The best surveillance happens when the target doesn't know they're being watched. My room at Sunnyvale was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the garden. It was comfortable. The staff were kind, though they treated me with that particular gentle firmness people use with dementia patients. I played the part they expected. Asked what day it was. Seemed confused about mealtimes. Forgot names. But every night, after they thought I was asleep, I reviewed everything. I'd brought a small audio recorder hidden in what looked like a sleep sound machine. Motion activated. Every conversation in my room was captured. I befriended the evening security guard, a veteran named Marcus, who reminded me of men I'd worked with overseas. I brought him cookies I'd made in the facility's cooking class, and we'd talk about his service. Slowly, carefully, I asked about the security systems, where the cameras were, how long footage was kept. "Miss Patricia, you're probably the sharpest resident we've got," he told me one night. "I don't know why your daughter thinks you need to be here." "She worries," I said simply. But I made sure Marcus knew where my room was, knew that if anything seemed wrong, he should check the footage. I was building my network, just like I'd done in Prague, in Beirut, in Belgrade. My grandson Daniel visited when he could. 19 years old, studying criminology at State, he'd always been fascinated by my career. He was the only family member I told the truth to. "Grandma, this is insane. We should go to the police now." "And tell them what, Danny? That I voluntarily signed power of attorney and moved here? They're not breaking any laws yet. I need evidence of actual fraud, actual theft. Right now, it's just suspicion." "So you're going undercover in your own life?" "Essentially, yes." Danny became my courier. He'd visit with photo albums, and hidden in the pages were folders of documents my attorney sent, updates on my accounts, information I needed. To any observer, a sweet grandson showing his grandmother family pictures. In reality, an intelligence operative receiving her briefings. And the briefings were damning. Within 6 weeks of getting power of attorney, Jessica and Brad had moved $150,000 from my investment account to a joint account in their names. They claimed it was to simplify management and pay for my care. But Sunnyvale cost $6,000 a month, and they'd taken 25 times that amount. Then they listed my house for sale, the home I'd bought with my retirement savings, the place I'd planned to live out my days. They listed it for $900,000, well below its $1.2 million market value. And the buyer? One of Brad's law firm partners. I sat in my room at Sunnyvale, listening to them on my hidden recorder. "Once the house closes, we can pay off the credit cards and take that Tahiti trip we've been planning," Jessica said. "Your mom won't remember any of this in 6 months anyway," Brad replied. "The facility director thinks she's deteriorating. Perfect timing." I'd spent 3 decades listening to people justify terrible things. Insurgents, war criminals, corrupt officials, they all had their reasons. But hearing my daughter, the child I'd carried and raised and loved despite all my failures as a mother, hearing her rationalize stealing from me, that hit differently. I waited until I was alone, late at night with the door closed, and I let myself cry, quietly, because even grief was tactical now. Then I talked to the photo of my late husband on my nightstand. Did I fail her, Tom? Was I really such a terrible mother that this is what she became? But self-pity doesn't solve problems. Action does. So I dried my eyes and kept working. I became close with another resident, a widower named Frank who'd been a Marine in Vietnam. He was lonely. His son hadn't visited in 3 years after some family argument neither could remember the origin of anymore. We played chess in the common room, and I listened to his stories, and eventually, gently, I encouraged him to reach out. "Life's too short for pride, Frank. Call him. The worst he can do is not answer." It took 3 weeks, but Frank's son visited. They reconciled over tears and apologies. Frank started smiling again, engaging with activities, looking forward to his son's weekly visits. It was genuine kindness on my part, but it also served a purpose. Frank's son met me, saw how sharp I was, how I'd helped his father. When the time came, he'd remember that. Witnesses matter in court cases. 5 months into my stay at Sunnyvale, Jessica filed for full conservatorship, not just power of attorney, but complete legal control. She wanted to make medical decisions, financial decisions, even decide where I lived. It was the Britney Spears playbook. And if it succeeded, I'd have no rights at all. Her petition cited my severe cognitive decline, my inability to manage daily tasks, my danger to myself. It was all lies, but it was documented lies. The Sunnyvale staff, believing what they'd been told and what they'd seen of my confusion, would support it. The hearing was set for November 15th. I had 6 weeks to finalize everything. Eleanor, my attorney, came to visit, ostensibly as a friend so Jessica wouldn't know. We sat in the garden, and I briefed her like I was back in Langley. I have 18 audio recordings of them discussing the fraud. I have financial records showing unauthorized transfers totaling $650,000. I have documentation that they sold my house below market value to a friend. I have testimony from Danny about what they told him. I have my own medical evaluation from Dr. Morrison, an independent neurologist who'll testify I have no cognitive impairment whatsoever. Patricia, this is the most thoroughly documented case I've ever seen. But are you sure you want to do this? She's your daughter. She's also a thief and an abuser. And if we don't stop her, she'll do this to someone else's mother. Maybe someone without my training, someone who can't fight back. The last piece fell into place a week before the hearing. Judge Maria Santos was assigned to the case. I'd worked with Maria in 1996, running psychological operations in the Balkans. She'd been a young JAG officer then, and we'd collaborated on interrogation protocols that stayed within legal bounds while still being effective. She was brilliant, ethical, and we'd stayed in touch occasionally over the years. I didn't contact her. That would be improper. But I knew when she saw my name and background she'd pay attention. The night before the hearing, Danny visited one last time. "Grandma, are you nervous?" "No, sweetheart. I've faced down terrorists and cartel leaders. I think I can handle your mother's lawyer." She's going to be so angry. I know. And underneath that anger, she's going to be hurt and scared, because she's going to have to face what she's become. That's going to be harder than any prison sentence. "Do you think you two can ever fix things?" I looked at my grandson, this kind, earnest young man who still believed in second chances. I don't know, but I hope so, because despite everything, she's still my daughter. And I wasn't always there for her. I own my part in how we got here. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. I'd asked Danny to bring me clothes, my own clothes, not the casual assisted living attire. A navy blue suit, modest jewelry, my hair done properly. Then, for effect, I had the facility staff bring me to the courtroom in a wheelchair. I could walk fine, but Jessica expected a frail, confused old woman. Let her think she was getting exactly that. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, formal. Jessica and Brad sat at the petitioner's table with their attorney, a nervous-looking young man named Chris Dalton who'd probably never handled a contested conservatorship before. Eleanor sat at our table, documents in perfect stacks before her. Jessica wore a black dress, appropriately somber for someone seeking to protect her incompetent mother. She'd even managed to produce tears when she talked to her attorney. Oscar-worthy, really. They wheeled me in, and I played my part. Slight confusion, looking around uncertainly, letting an aide help position my wheelchair. Jessica's smirk was instant. Brad squeezed her hand. Chris looked relieved that his case would be so straightforward. Then Judge Santos entered, and we all stood well, except me and my wheelchair. Naturally. She took her seat, opened the case file, and started reading. I watched her face. The moment she saw my full name, the moment she read my background information, the CIA file Eleanor had submitted, the recognition dawning, the shock, the sudden understanding that something was very wrong with this case. The gavel dropped from her hand. Patricia Reynolds? Agent Confessor? The one from Belgrade? And that's when I stood up, legs perfectly steady, and smiled. "Hello, Your Honor. It's been a long time." The courtroom erupted. Jessica gasped. Brad swore under his breath. Chris looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. The court reporter's fingers flew across her steno machine, capturing every word. "Miss Reynolds, you can walk?" Judge Santos asked. "Yes, Your Honor, I can walk, talk, think, and apparently, according to the evidence we're about to present, run circles around people who thought I was senile." "Your Honor, I don't understand what's happening," Chris stammered. "The medical reports are based on a performance," I interrupted. "One I've been giving for 18 months while documenting every crime my daughter and son-in-law committed against me." Jessica found her voice. "Mom, what are you? You've been faking. This whole time?" I turned to look at her, really look at her, and I saw the moment she understood. Her mother hadn't lost her mind. Her mother had been working. "Counselor," Judge Santos said to Eleanor, "I think you'd better explain what's going on." What followed was 3 hours of presentation. Eleanor was magnificent, laying out the case piece by piece like the prosecutor she'd once been. She played the audio recordings. Jessica and Brad's voices filled the courtroom, discussing how to spend my money, how I wouldn't remember their theft, how the Sunnyvale staff thought I was deteriorating perfectly on schedule. With each clip, I watched my daughter sink lower in her chair. Eleanor presented the financial forensics, every unauthorized transfer, annotated and highlighted. The house sale to Brad's law partner at $300,000 below market value, the credit card bills they'd paid with my money, the vacation deposits, the car lease, total amount fraudulently taken, $970,000. Dr. Morrison testified. He'd evaluated me at Eleanor's request 3 months prior, secretly during what Sunnyvale thought was a routine checkup. His assessment: cognitively intact, no signs of dementia or impairment, functioning at the level of a healthy adult her age. The Sunnyvale director testified, clearly distressed. I had no idea. They told us she had early-onset Alzheimer's. She seemed confused. "I was performing," I said gently. "It's not your fault. I'm trained to be convincing." Marcus, the security guard, testified about my sharpness, my awareness, the chess games with Frank that required complex strategic thinking. Frank's son testified about how I'd helped his father, how clear and thoughtful I'd been. And Danny testified, tears running down his face, about the conversations with his mother where she'd coached him to support the conservatorship. She told me Grandma would be better off not having to worry about finances. She made it sound like mercy. But I knew Grandma was fine. She helped me study for my criminal psychology exam. She's sharper than my professors. Throughout all of this, Jessica sat frozen, occasionally whispering to Brad, who looked like he was mentally calculating prison sentences. Finally, Judge Santos asked if I wanted to address the court. I stood, without the wheelchair now, and faced my daughter. "Your Honor, I need to say something to Jessica directly, if that's permitted." "Go ahead, Miss Reynolds." I walked to the center of the courtroom, looking at my daughter. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Jessica, I wasn't a good mother. I know that. I missed your childhood because I was overseas stopping people from doing terrible things. I told myself I was making the world safer, and maybe I was, but I made your world smaller and lonelier. You needed me, and I wasn't there. I can't take that back, and I'm sorry." Jessica's tears were real now, streaming down her face. "But, baby, this wasn't the answer. Stealing from me, locking me away, trying to erase my autonomy, that didn't fix the hurt I caused. It just created more hurt, more damage. You needed therapy, not my bank account. You needed to tell me you were angry, not punish me through fraud. I hated you," she choked out. "I hated that you were never there. I hated that your job was always more important. And then you retired and you had all this money and this house and all these years you could have been with me. I know, and you're right to be angry. But what you did was a crime, multiple crimes, and there have to be consequences for that, just like there would be for anyone else." Judge Santos let the moment settle, then spoke. "Mr. Dalton, I assume you'd like to withdraw the conservatorship petition?" Chris nodded frantically. "Yes, Your Honor. Immediately." Petition denied and dismissed with prejudice. Miss Reynolds clearly has full capacity. She turned to Jessica and Brad. "As for you two, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. The charges will likely include elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, and theft. You're both ordered to surrender your passports. Bail will be set at a separate hearing." Brad stood up, face red. "This is entrapment. She set us up. You stole nearly $1 million from an elderly woman and tried to strip her of her legal rights. The fact that she was smart enough to document it doesn't make it entrapment. It makes you criminals who got caught." Judge Santos's voice could have cut glass. "Court is adjourned. Deputies, please take the defendants into custody." I watched as they handcuffed my daughter. She looked at me, her face a mix of anger and shame and something that might have been regret. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know," I said. "And after you face the consequences, maybe we can work on forgiving each other. But that's going to take time. A lot of time." 6 months later, I visited Jessica at the Women's Minimum Security Facility, where she was serving a reduced sentence. She'd taken a plea deal, 3 years with possibility of parole after 18 months, full restitution of the stolen funds, and mandatory family therapy as a condition of her release. Brad got 5 years for his role and his attempts to obstruct justice after their arrest. The visiting room was beige and institutional, but Jessica looked better than I'd expected. Clearer, somehow, less of the brittle anger that had driven her actions. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I'll always come, baby. I wasn't there enough before, but I'm here now. I've been in therapy 3 times a week. Dr. Williams is helping me understand why I did what I did. It wasn't really about the money, I know. It was about hurt, about feeling abandoned and unvalued. She says I was trying to punish you by taking away your independence, the way I felt you took away my childhood by not being present." Jessica twisted her hands together. "I'm so ashamed." Shame is appropriate. But it's not the end of the story. You can grow from this, be better. We both can. We talked for an hour about therapy, about her realizations, about the ways we'd both failed each other. It wasn't comfortable, and we both cried, but it was honest. More honest than we'd been with each other in decades. As I left, she called after me. "Mom, how did you know? From the beginning, how did you know what we were doing?" I turned back and gave her a small smile. "Baby, I spent 32 years getting people to confess their deepest secrets. I know human nature. I know tells and tactics and manipulation strategies. But more than that, I know you. I watched you grow up. And when you started visiting after years of distance, asking pointed questions about my memory, my finances, I knew something was wrong. A mother knows her child, even when that child is trying to deceive her. You're really good at what you did, weren't you?" Yes, I was, and that training saved me, but it didn't make me a good mother. I'm still working on that part. Now sitting in my house, the one I got back after the legal proceedings, I play chess with Danny while he studies for his finals. He's decided to specialize in elder law and victim advocacy after everything that happened. "Grandma, do you think Mom will really change?" "I think she's trying. That's all anyone can do." "Do you forgive her?" I move my bishop, capturing his knight. Forgiveness is complicated, Danny. It's not a switch you flip. It's a process, a choice you make every day. Some days I feel more forgiving than others. But I'm committed to trying, because the alternative is losing my daughter completely. And despite everything, I don't want that. You're pretty remarkable. You know that? I laugh. I'm a stubborn old woman who refused to be a victim. That's different. No, your agent confessor, the ghost of Belgrade, a legend. I'm a retired operative who got too good at reading people for her own family's good, but maybe that's exactly what saved me in the end. Later, alone in my kitchen, I make tea and think about what I've learned through all of this. People underestimate the elderly. They see physical decline and assume mental decline follows automatically. They mistake patience for weakness, kindness for confusion. Jessica and Brad made that mistake, and it cost them everything. But I also learned that my career cost me something too. I was so focused on reading enemies, on understanding threats, that I never saw the hurt I was causing my own daughter. I never applied those skills to healing my family, only to protecting my country. Maybe that's the real lesson. All the training in the world means nothing if you don't use it for the people you love. Not just to catch them in their crimes, but to understand their pain before it turns into something criminal. I've started writing letters to Jessica, real letters where I talk about my feelings instead of just facts. It's harder than any intelligence report I ever filed. Vulnerability is terrifying when you've spent your life being strategically invulnerable. But she's my daughter. And if there's any chance we can build something real out of the ruins of our relationship, I have to try. Frank from Sunnyvale comes by sometimes. We still play chess, and he's teaching me to cook his mother's lasagna recipe. His son joined us last week, bringing his kids. We're building community, the kind I never had time for during my career. The local senior center asked me to do a presentation on financial safety for the elderly. I said yes. If my experience can help someone else avoid what I went through, then maybe all of it means something more. People sometimes ask me if I'm angry, if I'm bitter about what my daughter tried to do to me. The truth is, I'm sad. Sad for the years we lost, sad for the pain that drove her to such desperate measures, sad for the relationship we never had. But I'm not bitter. Bitterness is what happens when you let the past control your present. I controlled the situation, gathered the evidence, secured justice. Now I'm choosing something harder than revenge. I'm choosing the possibility of healing. Because at the end of the day, Jessica was right about one thing. My job was easier than being her mother. I was good at the job. I'm still learning how to be good at the mother part. The CIA taught me how to break people down, how to find their weaknesses and exploit them. But they never taught me how to build people back up, how to take the broken pieces of a relationship and make something whole. I'm learning that now, at 68, one awkward conversation and one honest letter at a time. It's slower than any intelligence operation I ever ran. The outcome is far less certain. But it matters more than any mission I completed in my 32 years of service. They called me the confessor because I could make anyone tell the truth. Now I'm learning to tell the truth myself about my failures, my regrets, the ways I could have been better. That might be the hardest confession of all. But it's also the most important. Last week, Danny told me his professor used my case as an example in his criminology class. Financial elder abuse and the importance of documentation, he said. The professor had no idea the subject of the case was Danny's grandmother. Did you tell him? I asked. No, I figured you'd want privacy. Actually, I think I want the opposite. I want people to know that this happens, that family members do this to their elderly parents, that you can fight back if you're prepared. Maybe that's my new mission. So I'm writing a book, a guide for seniors on protecting themselves from financial exploitation. Eleanor is helping with the legal parts, Dr. Morrison with the medical aspects. Danny is making it accessible for people without intelligence training. It's not as exciting as running operations in foreign countries, but it might help more people than I ever helped in the CIA. And maybe, when Jessica gets out, when we've both done the work of healing, she can help too. She understands the perpetrator's psychology now, the rationalizations and the warning signs. That knowledge, combined with her genuine remorse, could save someone else's family from the same destruction. That's hope, isn't it? the possibility that even our worst mistakes can become lessons that help others. That no damage is so complete that something worthwhile can't grow from it. I don't know if Jessica and I will ever have the relationship I wish we'd had, but we're building something new, something more honest than what we had before. It's fragile and imperfect and requires constant work. But then again, so does anything worth having. And maybe that's the real story here. Not that an elderly woman outsmarted her would-be exploiters using CIA training, but that a mother and daughter, both flawed and hurting, are learning to see each other clearly for the first time and choosing love over resentment despite how hard that choice is. That's harder than any interrogation I ever conducted, and more important than any intelligence I ever gathered. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I'm learning that's not true. At 68, I'm learning to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, to build instead of just analyzing, to hope instead of just planning. My daughter is learning too, learning accountability, self-awareness, the difference between explanation and excuse. Maybe we'll both get there eventually. Together, if we're lucky. Apart, if we're not, but still better than we were. Either way, I'm not the victim of this story, and Jessica isn't just the villain. We're both complicated people who hurt each other and are trying to do better. That's the truth the confessor finally learned to tell.